Good morning and welcome to The VUU. Hope you're having a good day today. We have a special guest with us this morning, but first I'm going to have our regulars introduce themselves. I guess I'll start. I'm Joanna Fontaine Crawford and I am in Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser, the one not giggling in Seattle, Washington.
Hey, I'm Bob LaValle in Buffalo, New York.
And I am Hank Purse. Spring has finally sprung here in Medford, Massachusetts. It is warm, and I've had a lot of coffee this morning. It's good.
Okay, we have been warned. Now, Aisha, was that originally Sleepless in Seattle? Was it originally not giggling in Seattle?
Well, I heard Hank giggling in my ear, so I didn't want anyone to think it was me. It's Hank the giggler this morning.
So what's going on in Seattle?
So the big news this week, I don't know if any of you saw the news about the CEO cutting his salary to raise every single employee to $70,000. So what's interesting about that, Kate Kramer, who's one of our AL teachers, one of our was a youth advisor last year, works there. And I remember when Kate got that job, she was telling me how progressive it is, and she said just wonderful things about it. And she's actually, if you see the New York Times picture, she's got bright red hair that's super straight. She's been she's kind of in the middle of the crowd when he announces it. So it's been pretty exciting here. And so she's an East Shore member. She's a Unitarian. Yay! Born a UU, raised UU. So really cool.
Wow, that is so cool. And the CEO, he's not just doing this by manipulating numbers, right? He's actually cutting his own.
No, he's cutting his own salary. I think the number something like $900,000 over the next. I think he's going to phase it in over the next 3 years. And in order to make it all work, he's going to cut his own salary. And I think they had like.
Meg has joined the call.
Meg and Motorhead have joined the call.
I was going to say, does she arrive everywhere with fanfare?
That's actually you too. I recognize the blur. Oh, now she's left the call. So $70,000 minimum. That is kind of amazing.
Well, the premise is he said he read an article that once people make over a certain amount of money, over $70,000, that's the threshold for happiness. That once your basic needs are met and you don't have to have insecurity about food and home and financial insecurity, that's the number, that's $70,000. So he wanted to have that for his employees.
Wow, amazing. And the Reverend Meg Riley joining us with, as we were saying, apparently a death metal fanfare when you first tried to come on.
Yeah, what happened there? Did I come in and you could see me but I couldn't see you? That was weird. Google, you're so interesting. Oh, I'm great. Jake Morrill is here for a couple of days and we are interviewing lots of interesting, quirky people about the edges of how we might support small groups, and it's just, it's so fun to have these conversations with such smart, committed people and imagine stuff. So, anyway, very, very beginning stages of some big, bold idea that's going to come out. But meanwhile, we're going to play the ukulele together and just do silly things. So anyway, I apologize for being late.
So is Jake actually physically there?
Yeah. He came up
I'm going to have him here next week.
Well, there you go. He's coming down for your ordination? I mean, your installation? Like a refrigerator you're getting installed? Or an app on an iPhone?
Right.
Yeah, right. Way cool. I wish I could be there. Because I hear there's a lot of quirky people in Austin.
There are a few quirky people, and in fact, we've changed the installation to an installation/hootenanny, and the planning team for the installation met last night, to kind of fix all the details. And I heard something about the decorating is going to involve cowboy boots. So, I wish everyone could be. Best installation ever.
You going to live stream it?
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. I'm going to try and record it.
I'm going to be out at Kathy and Heather Rion Starr's installation this week in Hartford, Connecticut, which should be really fun. That's also going to be, it's so much fun to celebrate communities and healthy, loving communities and all of that. I've always thought everyone should have an ordination, you know, like not just ministers, like everybody who's serving should have that kind of a huge celebration of their service, you know, because you look around and there are just so many people contributing to the world in such amazing ways. Like teachers should have that kind of a celebration, for God's sake, especially now. And, you know, religious educators certainly should have them, you know, but anyway.
Yeah, I felt that way about the laying on of hands. We, you know, on one hand we have this meaning that's specifically about ministers and what has been passed down generation to generation, but it's also about laying on hands to send someone out to do ministry in the world, and that's what every single one of the members doing. So anyway,
you know, we just did here in Milton, where I'm the interim minister, we just had last Sunday an installation of the new search committee for their settled minister, and we did a big laying on of hands there of them, and
that's great.
So which was good, and I think everyone was like, "Whoa, this is good! All right, excellent." So
powerful.
I've heard some of the congregations are really kind of freaked out by that laying on of hands, and you know, that maybe it should be called something else in some congregations, but that hand-to-hand touch and channeling to me is so beautiful. And
you know, I've heard people kind of a little weirded out about it beforehand, and then after they actually see it, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone with anything negative to say. It's just all, wow, that was really powerful.
Well, that's good. You just stay in that little bubble.
Yeah. So, Hank, what's going on where you are, other than nice weather?
Last Sunday, I was able to take part in the installation of, I had to think of all the different things I wanted to talk about, but I was able to take part in the installation of Rebecca Froome, who is the new minister of the United First Parish Church in Quincy. I had done my student ministry there like 16 or 17 years ago, and so it was nice to be back there. It's also known as the Church of the Presidents. John Quincy Adams, and I'm trying to think of their wives' names. Louise. Anyway, and their wives are buried in a crypt in the basement. Abigail, thank you, Abigail, and then I think Louise is John Quincy Adams' wife, and it was a fantastic day, and Rebecca is the first minister of that congregation in 375 year history.
Wow.
So it was a big.
Is Quincy named for John Quincy Adams, or is John Quincy Adams named for Quincy?
Quincy is named for John Quincy Adams.
So I wonder what it was before that.
It was part of Braintree.
Okay, thank you.
Which is one of those things that when you grow up around here, you just think of it as a name, but when you leave, people go, Braintree?
It is like, really weird.
What? Yeah.
So, Hank, how are things going with Pot Stove Report? Are you caught all up on the candidating announcements?
Yeah, there's a few people who are still working out stuff. It's most of the people who haven't announced yet are people who are serving congregations right now, presently serving congregations right now, and need a little extra time. I also have to say I haven't heard that much from the West Coast, in part because I don't know my connections on the West Coast aren't as strong.
Jolinda.
And
nobody tells me anything either here. It's the Wild West. It's a whole different thing, man, than the East Coast. I'll tell you.
And of course, and the other thing that's going on here right now is it's the second anniversary of yesterday was the second anniversary of the bombing of the marathon, and there's still I always get anxious at this time of year. Things always happen, whether it's some sort of tax right protest or some white power protest, or Waco happened at this time of year, and Oklahoma City. So I guess I always get anxious at this time of year, and it's just a weird time. So that to be honest, that's where I am. But in the bigger picture, life is good. Everyone is healthy and happy, and the sun is shining. So we're happy here.
So we take what we can get. And Bob, it's nice to have you from behind the chalice today. What's going on where you are?
I was really proud to participate in Buffalo with the nationwide protests around raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And so a coalition of local groups did a great job of getting folks out for a march and then a rally. In fact, our rally was right on where, like, sort of Main Street, which is the main thoroughfare between downtown Buffalo and the suburbs. So everyone who was, bailing out of the city to go back home had to drive by us, and it was right in front of the University of Buffalo. So we had a great turnout from the adjuncts who work for less than minimum wage, teaching college students.
God, I've heard that they make horrible money, but I've never heard it put that way, that it's less than minimum wage.
Yeah. Well, there was a woman got up and spoke who was an adjunct at Niagara University, and she gets paid $2,100 per course. $2,100 for a semester-long course. So the minimum wage here in New York State is $8.75 an hour, and a family can't make it. A family of just one parent, one child can't make it in Buffalo, low cost of living city. So I was really happy to see the turnout. Really happy to see the coalition of folks coming together. There was a fair amount of people of clergy there, which was great, and really nice cross section of the city. So it's encouraging to see people stepping up for what's important.
Very cool. Well, joining us today is Jolinda Stephens, who is coordinator for the VUU Voices for Justice of Washington State. Is that right?
That's correct. And we are one of the VUU SANs. I believe there are 28 of them around the country.
SAN? What's a SAN?
A State Advocacy Network. And the state advocacy networks are growing steadily. Come to our table at GA and find out more. Unlike a lot of state advocacy networks, VUU Voices specializes in the state legislature. So we're a 501c4 rather than a 501c3, and we lobby. The legislature just had its last day to pass non-budget bills yesterday. It's been very intense.
How many folks were there yesterday?
At the legislature?
Yeah, when you said you lobbied yesterday, was it a group lobby visit?
Oh, no.
Oh, just the staff?
We actually got everyone together. I guess since we lobbied for marriage equality several years ago, because Washington State has had it for quite a while, we haven't gathered as a group at the legislature. Washington is a very large state with the mountains in between, so getting everybody together is hard. So on March 31st, we came together and got speakers from the main environmental organizations, including a 10-year-old from Plant for the Planet, who spoke about the Carbon Pollution Accountability Act, which was proposed by the governor and made it through the House, which is slightly Democratic, and not stalled in the Senate. We were hoping, because it contains some bit of climate justice, I guess you could say. We were hoping that it would be a part of the Democrats' budget in the House, and it didn't make it in. We are still lobbying for it, because until the budget is hammered down, and that may not be until June, it's still alive. So we gathered, and there were about 100 of us, and then after we had our rally, we went out and talked and lobbied. But I'm down there several days a week lobbying. Yesterday I did it by TV.
Wow. Now, here in Texas, we have the VUU Legislative Network, and they are extremely busy right now, because in Texas, it's just a whole other season of crazy this year. Washington is politically very different.
Say crazy in Texas. I mean, it's
hey.
it's ableist language, but You do rewrite the definition of legislation all the time for many of us.
Oh,
I mean,
it's kind.
oh my goodness.
It's constant, and right now what's going on is you have these people who are so anxious because they can see that their world is about to change, and especially the upcoming Supreme Court decision on marriage equality, which we're expecting to go for marriage equality. And so they are, it's more than the rest of the country. I think like 20 different anti-LGBT bills have been introduced, with a whole lot of them saying basically, we don't care what the Supreme Court says, we're going to do what, but in Washington State, Jolinda, how, in Texas, a whole lot of what we're doing is being on the defensive. How much of that do y'all have to do?
Oh, we have to do a lot of it, and the split right now is between the House and the Senate. Yesterday, a bill just made it through that would allow, would require, I guess, allow or require, I'm not sure, cops doing field sobriety tests, by the side of the road to take blood. Yes.
Wait, they'd be taking by the side of the road?
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
And I'm sure the police are really excited about that too.
That is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard.
That one came out of left field, and I think it was an amendment to a bill, because I actually, and that's one of the things I wanted to tell you about. I actually am a part of a group of lobbyists called the Racial Equity Team. The steering committee is all lobbyists of color. It includes some of the heavy hitters, ACLU, the State Labor Council, several good unions, and so I can't even remember where I started with that. But at any rate, that has been a very exciting development for me.
Jolinda, I'd love to hear more about how that developed. Did the groups like the ACLU take leadership in creating such a thing, or how did that evolve?
It apparently evolved out of lobbyists of color. So this is my first year. I just know what they told me. It's been going on for several years. And some lobbyists of color got together and said, "Hey, we need to work together," and so they also
the organizer in me just wants the details. So lobbyists of color for different organizations,
right,
unions, and environmental groups,
right,
and so they came together across issues and said, in all of these issues, we want a coalition focused on racial equity. Is that?
That's absolutely, and they just issued the Principles for Climate Justice, which are really, really excellently well thought out. It's aimed at the Carbon Pollution Accountability Act, but they are very broad principles that apply widely to what it really means to have climate justice involved in what you're doing. I tend to think that most of us have a very surface idea of what climate justice means. We say, well, I understand that people of color and people in lower income communities are hit the hardest with pollution. So anything I do to address pollution is climate justice, and completely leaving out the democracy part, the part of involving the communities that are most directly hit in making the decisions. And so, and the Principles for Climate Justice just lay that out so beautifully in very, very concrete terms.
Are those online somewhere that other people could look at them?
Not yet. They just came out yesterday. I can get permission and send them to you.
Well, I'm just thinking with the whole Commit to Respond movement, that would be really great to insert those into the conversation.
Absolutely, and I am a part of the conversation. I would commit to respond. I'm part of the planning team for. Have you heard about our public witness is now going to be sacred witness? It's another very exciting development of climate justice, because it will showcase, and they are involved in the planning, the Lummi Nation's fight to stop the largest coal terminal in the country from being built on their sacred lands.
Aren't those sacred lands up near Seattle? Is that where we're talking with the Lummi Nation?
They're up near Canada.
Yeah,
so they're just above Bellingham, which is kind of your last major stop before
I know
Canada.
Beth Brownfield well, and she has been a zealous advocate for the Lummi Nation for years. So I hope she's in on your conversations.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And Beth and Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship, their relationship with not only the Lummi Nation, but also a farm workers organization called Community to Community. It's many other things, but that's the easiest way to describe it. Are exemplars of what it means to be in accountable relationship as a congregation, and they've maintained these relationships over a number of years, and Beth is certainly key to that.
And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm going to go on it anyway. Jolinda, you're a former religious educator. Beth is a former religious educator. I have always said, as a former religious educator, that religious educators are the organizing engine of our congregations. And I wonder if that feels true to you, if this feels like you're still doing religious education, what you feel like is the connection between what you're doing now and what you did for some other years.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like what I'm doing is religious education. I'm a registered.
Oops, did we just lose Jolinda?
She froze.
Our stances have a theological undergrounding.
Jolinda, we're losing you.
Oh, well, I did catch.
Well, let's just guess what she was going to say. Let's just guess. Oh, she's back. Okay.
Okay. I can't believe all the technical problems I'm having this morning. I Zoom.
Step back to your register. Zoom is much easier than this. Step back to your register.
Logical underpinnings, Jolinda.
Okay. I'm a registered lobbyist, and yet it takes the lobbying of all of us to get the work done. And so every stand that we take has theological underpinnings that I articulate in conjunction with my board, and I spend a lot of time just explaining to people how to speak out, how to talk to legislators, how to bring your whole self to the legislators, because as you use, we tend to just look at the policy points, and we forget to bring our hearts, and we forget to bring our beliefs.
I want to give a shout out to you, Jolinda, because when I first came to Seattle, and you had been hired shortly after I got here, and I had heard a couple of people say, well, VUU Voices for Justice doesn't do much. They don't really do, kind of defunct. They're kind of just there. And I will tell you, since Jolinda's been in this role, there has been dynamism around. We've had people from East Shore go and attend your rallies that you set up at the detention center along with in Olympia. So it's kudos to you, because I feel that VUU Voices for Justice, I get the emails, I hear about them on Facebook. You've done a real service, and it's been just so inspiring to see what you've done with it. Because like I said, when you first got here, everybody, a few people have been here a long time, have just kind of just shrugged their shoulders, but you've really been amazing. So thank you for that. And really, the work right now, our social justice work, is in the States. So I hope the STAN network expands to every state.
Thank you, Aisha.
So, Jolinda, do you have kind of a lobbying 101 of, what's some information that you would give to someone who was interested in going and, lobbying on behalf of an issue?
I would tell them to send an email to make an appointment. I would tell them it's better to develop the relationship before the legislature is in session. We have a part-time legislature, so it's better to get to know your legislator before. But if you haven't done that, be sure to find out some personal things about them, to make contact through either the personal things or some legislation that they've sponsored that you agree with. And then before you go, I would suggest that you think of stories. Stories are really, really important to legislators. They will move legislators, and for a legislator that agrees with you, it gives them stories to tell, which is one of the things they use to move their colleagues. So think of the stories that relate to this, and then why? Why are you so passionate about this particular bill? What values, what theology drives you to take this stand? And that's all you need to tell them. They hear the policy points all the time. They don't really need those, although knowing something about them, because they will probe, is important. But that's not where I would spend my time.
Can you give us a success story, Jolinda, something you felt that you have personally made an impact or gotten through to someone?
That's a difficult one. Yes, I can. When we were lobbying for the Trust Act, we actually were talking to a Republican who had been a police officer, and it turned out as we probed a little bit and talked to him about what his concerns with the Trust Act, and the Trust Act is what would stop, what would take ICE enforcement out of the hands of police. So as we probed that, we mentioned that it violated people's Fourth Amendment rights because no judge had looked at the order that they were using to put people in detention. Nobody had looked at it. It was just an ICE official who decided that this person was somebody they were looking for. And so it turned out that the Fourth Amendment was something that was really, really important to him. And he told us stories, and we told him stories about people who had been stopped and their whole lives disrupted over a tail light that was out, and people who had been deported and their children had been they were separated from their wives and children. So that's one story. So just probing non-judgmentally will get you an awful lot often, because these aren't cardboard enemies, you know. They are real people with all kinds of ideas and beliefs and stories of their own.
One of the things that surprised me after moving here was how everybody in the state of Washington is not as liberal as I thought. It's mostly like an island of the West, it seems, and anything, you know, drive a half hour east and it's basically, it could be, you know, a red state, but I think it's only blue because of Seattle and Bellevue and the coast. So I was very surprised that, and because our legislature, the Senate, aren't both houses Republican now, or is it?
No, there's a 2-vote majority for Democrats in the House.
Okay.
And then there's that weird coalition in the Senate that nobody wants to hear about. It was very strange.
So, Jolinda, it sounds like your main push right now is climate justice. I was wondering if that's the case, and how your coalition came to choose that. I mean, very worthy topic.
Well, we gather once a year in November to kind of mull over what we think is going to happen in the legislature. And by we, I mean the members of UU Voices. We have both individual members and congregational members. And then we vote on the top ones. This year we did it differently. This year we gathered, because of those huge mountains and all that distance, we gathered using Zoom. And your own Carrie was really instrumental in getting that set up for us and running the board. And it was incredibly successful. We had a few more people.
That's Carrie Kaufman, the Church of the Larger Fellowship Fellow, who should get a shout out because she's so awesome.
Yeah. Yes, she is very awesome. And so we gathered people online. I should give Renee a shout out, but I never can pronounce her last name. She's the most knowledgeable person in the UU world, I think, about how to do these conferences online. And she told me to get information out in video ahead of time. So we kind of cut down the field to what we thought was going to be most important and did interviews with key leaders around those things, cut them down to like 4 minutes and put them up and asked people to see them before they participated. And then we had people come together in their congregation so that there was time for congregational discussion. And out of that came the Carbon Pollution Accountability Act, something to improve safety for oil and coal trains, the minimum wage, and those were our first tier. Also, Washington State, this great liberal state, has the worst tax system in the country. It is the most unequal. And by a whole lot, it's worse than even the next top one, which is Florida. So the other was...
I didn't know that about Washington. Is that because of property tax, or what makes it so regressive?
It's sales tax. We run off of sales tax. Now, one of the things that we were going to support and that the Democrats have in their budget is a capital gains tax. That will help a little. The Carbon Pollution Accountability Act would put the burden on the polluters to pay. So that's a tiny step towards what needs to happen. I'm not quite sure. I mean, this is historical. It goes back to, I believe, 1930. And I don't know why we can't get a move on taxes. We can't blame it all on the Republicans, I don't think.
We are halfway through the show. If you are just tuning in with us, let's do another round of introductions. I'm Joanna Fontaine Crawford. I'm in Austin, Texas.
Meg Riley in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Hank Purse in Medford, Massachusetts.
Aisha Hauser, Seattle, Washington.
Bob LaValle in Buffalo, New York.
And I'm Jolinda Stephens, the guest in Tacoma, Washington, just below where Aisha is.
Yes. So, Jolinda, what are you most excited about right now?
I think I'm really looking forward to General Assembly, and I'm looking forward to being able to see the outcome of the work that we're doing to create this sacred witness, this sacred public witness that will allow us to grieve what's happening to the planet, to face our fears and our feeling of overwhelm, and to get past that, and to understand more deeply what climate justice means.
I'd love to hear more about this language, sacred witness, because it seems like it's potentially very powerful. Is it meant to apply to all of our, what we used to call public witness?
Well, you know, one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to it is that I'm on a kind of a technical part of it. I'm on the outreach team, and the people on the team for actually shaping the Sacred Witness are shaping it. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to look to see it, because that may be a model for public witness for us in the future. So it's not going to contain speeches. There are going to be a couple of speeches in the hall before we leave, basically from Lummi Nation leaders. But once we get outside, there will be movement. There will be ways of grieving and ways of expressing hope. And so I don't know precisely what form it's going to take, but I think it's as an exciting move forward for us.
So it's more about ritual
that
than
we've been on.
It's more about ritual rather than speechifying.
Yes, and if you think of Joanna Macy, some of what Joanna Macy is doing, that might give you some idea. Of course, it's going to draw from elements of Lummi spirituality, but that might give you an idea.
That is exciting.
This past Tuesday was the 10th anniversary of VUU Mass Action, which is our local advocacy group here in Massachusetts. It was their 10th year of doing of having sort of they would have of having a day when we go and talk about what we're advocating at the State House, and it always starts with an event at one of the local churches in Boston, and with a speaker and then some snacks, and then also having people come in and talk to us about how to go and speak to our legislators, and as well as giving us lists of who are your legislators and what are the talking points, and it's really great. It's great because it gets gets our name out in the religious out in the political world. It gets our people, many of whom have never been to the State House before, or at least not to go and speak to their legislators before, to get them out there, give them some training, get them out there. It's really one of the my favorite things that folks do every year. Though I wasn't able to be there this year, but a really great thing, a great way to get Unitarian Universalists excited about our faith and the way we are in the world, and it's and it really is. There aren't many other religious groups that do this, and I always think, Meg, of that story of that you've told numerous times, even on here, of being a child and your folks working with the folks in West Virginia to change laws about reptiles in churches and that sort of stuff. So it's always a great message for folks. Where our muscle is small in numbers, but we've got we're good at reaching out to politicians.
Jolinda, I'm curious, are there any issues that you're working on that are controversial among Unitarian Universalists? I mean, like here in Texas, immigration is something that we feel very strongly about, but among UUs, there's a whole lot of different views about what should be done around that. What do you have anything like that you're dealing with?
I would say immigration is definitely one of them. We have here in Tacoma one of the larger detention centers in the country. When it's full, it can hold 1,600 people. And last year, for a number of years, people had been going there, a lot of them UU congregations, on Saturdays once a month to kind of give hugs and be present to people who are coming to visit their family members. But nothing really strong had happened, and I joined with a group of people that were led by undocumented immigrants and other immigrants to stop the deportation buses. And we were successful. I mean, we weren't. tactically, it was a very difficult situation, but we brought cameras. We got a lot of news people there. And so they weren't going to do their deportation buses in front of all those cameras. So, from there, one bus did get out and was turned back. And those folks went back in and said, hey, there are people out there trying to stop deportations. And from that, internal organizing happened in the detention center, and they went on a hunger strike that lasted almost 2 months. And it just sparked organizing inside. There is a nonprofit law firm here that specializes in immigration. Imagine a nonprofit law firm that specializes and they're not funded by anybody. And they have taken some cases that nobody thought could be won, cases of people coming out of Mexico who fear for their life. In the past, nobody won those cases for amnesty, and now they're starting to win them. We just had another great judicial decision out of the federal court here that they have to release people even if they don't have bond, if they meet the criteria. So apparently all over the country up until right now, nobody was being released on bond without a bond. They weren't being released on supervision. And so from now on, more people will be able to be out of the detention centers. But what I would say is controversial, and this applies to all the other things that are going on with Black Lives Matter and Jim Crow. We have got to stop our addiction to incarceration, and the idea, and for immigration, there is just absolutely no reason why they should be locking people up, except that it puts a lot of money in the pockets of Geo and I can't remember the name of the other big corporation, but
CCC. Oh, CCC.
Yes.
CCAC,
is it? Yeah, right. CCA.
Yeah.
So I think that whole idea of our criminal justice system being so corrupt and so racist and so just going against every principle we, both as UUs and as Americans, claim that we hold. And I think that's going to take an awful lot of work. It's still when somebody unarmed gets shot, it's still very difficult to talk to people in UU congregations because there's just so much questioning.
I mean, how many people in UU congregations, is it that there are a few people who talk a lot about All Lives Matter or whatever, or is it fear of conflict, or, I mean, how divided are we? I've been trying to figure that out. Like, how much is it a few vocal people, and how much is it really a much deeper commitment to white superiority that we're really struggling with here? And I'm curious your take on it from being out talking to people.
Well, I think that people, I'm trying to think of a quote and it's not coming to me, but when people have comfortable lives and they live within those lives, it is hard for them to imagine what's going on outside of it. It's also hard to keep up your commitment to a cause that seems very, very discouraging. That I have been so inspired by being associated with the Northwest Detention Center Resistance, because if anybody should be giving up, it's that leadership. And yet they have a goal, they have a vision, and they know how to keep feeding what they need to keep going. And I think it's easier for us because it's not affecting us directly often to kind of just draw back. And I really think that's where a lot of people are. And the whole climate justice movement, means that we have to understand how the profit motive has been affecting how it interacts with climate justice, and we kind of have to let go of our unthinking buying into that and start opposing some things that we consider very basic, and I think that's hard to do.
That whole thing about politics makes strange bedfellows. Are there any, and this was something that when I was living in Houston, we liberals were working very closely with evangelical Christians on the issue of human trafficking. Are there any kind of unusual alliances that you've been a part of?
No, I can't. I've only been doing this for a year now, this particular part of politics, and so no, I can't say that any come to mind. Although I do know. I mean, when you talk about Catholics, whom we have so many disagreements with, when you're talking about economic justice, when you're talking about the death penalty, you're talking about very, very strong allies, and when you talk about immigration.
And people who are, in many cases, way out further than we are. We like to think of ourselves as the edge, but on so many issues, the Catholics are the leaders. And the Catholic social justice teachings, I've always felt, have held the nation together in a way that many people are really not aware of. And it concerns me because now with the kind of seminary, the Catholic seminaries being taken over by the right and the only people allowed to come in being much more conservative, I'm like, but the new Pope, on the other hand, is reviving that commitment. Yes. So it's just, I used to thank every Catholic in D.C. around, thank you for the Catholic social justice teachings. They are a blessing to our nation. Yeah.
Well, here in Tacoma, Father Bix just died recently. He was in his 80s, I think, and he had been arrested more than 50 times. The last time about 2 years ago, about 4 years ago, he did 2 years in the federal pen as an elderly man, and it had to do with nuclear disarmament. So yeah, lots and lots of that being ahead of us.
I'm curious to go back to what Hank was talking about. This kind of experience is such a powerful tool for engagement for members of our congregation who may not consider themselves advocates or not get how that works or just have no experience. And I was wondering what works, what succeeds when you're trying to get congregants to come out, just folks, people with jobs and families who are really busy. What works in getting them engaged?
One of the things I think that works, and that I wish I was better about expressing, is just that this is damn fun. This is exciting stuff, and if we could convey what the benefits are from coming out of your usual routine and doing these kinds of risky things in some cases. I don't know, that and just repetition. If you just keep putting the issues before people, putting before people what they can do, and technology is helping. VUU Voices just recently started paying one-click politics for being able to send people a link to an already written email where all they have to do is enter their address and it goes off. Some of those things help, and they're kind of the entry-level drugs that kind of get people started.
The gateway drug to advocacy.
Yeah. Yes.
Then you move on to the hard stuff, like the
Yes.
office visits and sitting in.
I think that fun. Go ahead, Aisha.
I was going to ask about have you found that youth are getting more involved, Jolinda, or have you reached out to, our youth in the area?
I have to some extent, but not as much as I would like. I'm only part-time. And I'm the community organizer, I'm the lobbyist, and I'm the one who does the admin, so that's very difficult. I'm thinking, though, of going to the Laredo retreat this August, I believe, and talking in a lot more depth with religious educators, because there is curricula that we have for our junior and senior high that we could bring together. What they want to do with what's going on in the legislature, and kind of just use the curricula and have the project be a legislative one, and I'd really like to help facilitate that.
That would be great, because youth are always, and at least the youth parents are always asking for social, their youth be involved in social justice work, and having something so local, I think, would be great.
Get the religious educators on it. The revolution will happen.
Yes, absolutely.
And much more important them doing that. It's great them coming in and teenagers coming in, but people think teenagers can only advocate for the state rock song, as opposed to doing something that's really powerful. It makes a real difference in people's lives.
We used to have a teenage conference in D.C. when I was there, and often just the aides would meet with you, but when a teenager came, the senators would often show up because they thought it'd be a great photo op, and they were completely unprepared for our teenagers who were not there for the state rocks, who knew how to just grill them, and that you could see them go from how did I get into, and I loved it, and the teenagers felt so empowered from it. It was used to love that conference.
I love planting that seed young too. It's such a powerful thing.
Well, in Columbus, Ohio, they used the Justice Makers curriculum, and the kids decided that they wanted to advocate at the corporate level for the tomato workers. And so they made a book, and we are talking about 10 to 12-year-olds. And they went to the corporate meeting, which happened to be in Cincinnati, and leafleted and talked to all of the people who came in. And then we also had someone inside. There was this was Kroger's, I think. There was a corporate resolution that related to it, but that was what they did, what they decided to do for the Immokalee workers.
It probably wasn't a coincidence that the religious educator was an instigator and justice activist. So again, I think the leadership of religious educators is so important in all of this. Just not to have my one drum that I bang, but I just
Can I tell one more story? I started working on immigration with kids in 2007. And we talked about all kinds of parts of this, and I'm talking about with the elementary, because even on Sundays, the youth are just so scheduled. They've got to do coming of age or OWL or something. But I was working with the younger kids, and I remember the day I told them about Senate Bill 1070 in Arizona. I spent most of that time trying to convince them that Arizonians weren't wicked and evil. They were absolutely outraged, and we made things to let their parents know about what was going on in Arizona, and so they were making those things, and we were working on a pamphlet to hand out, and one of the 8-year-olds said to the others, I bet Santa doesn't have his papers. And they all go, Yeah, right. And they just kind of drifted away and made this wonderful poster that had the SWAT team with their machine guns pointed at Santa, and then in another pane, Santa was being arrested, and he was saying, "But I was just doing my job," and the cop says, "Tell it to the judge, bub." And my favorite was a panel of a reindeer in the back of a van being taken away. I mean, it's just
Brilliant.
That is awesome.
Brilliant.
it was just incredible. And
I
that
want
was
to see those
Let me just
memes.
say, if I did that, I'd get into so much trouble. But look at you, no, Jolinda's lovely. No, me. People would be writing me letters. Oh, that's great.
Hey, speaking of immigration, are there any congregations in the area in Washington State that are thinking about doing sanctuary work?
I've talked to a few. You know, it takes an awful lot of resources to be able to do that, but there is some talk about joining together with other congregations, not necessarily UU. So one might have the building and another might have people who could, you know, take care of all the many things that need to be taken care of. So there is a little talk, but that's a really big step for most of our congregations.
There's a lot of steps to do.
Is there any talk, Aisha? Yes, absolutely. Aisha, does East Shore have any talk about it?
No, and it's what I'm finding with that is that's the ministers. Religious educators can do a lot, but something like sanctuary really has to come from the senior minister to say, yeah, let's do this. But we do. One of the things East Shore is doing is we're one of the places for compassion and choices that I think Shoreline is too. That if someone doesn't have a place to die, that we're one of the places they can come to. So, you know, and we do congregations for the homeless. So for 1 month, we have folks sleep in the church. So we do have that. But we haven't yet. I mean, I think people have kind of floated the idea and asked, especially after there was so much press around Denver. But definitely, I think that has to come from the ministers for sure.
Well, we have managed to fill up another complete hour, and Jolinda, you talked about fun, so I just have to share this. It's one of my favorite quotes by Molly Ivins, who said, "So keep fighting for freedom and justice, beloveds, but don't you forget to have fun doing it. Lord, let your laughter ring forth, be outrageous, ridicule the fraidy cats, rejoice in all the oddities that freedom can produce, and when you get through kicking ass and celebrating the sheer joy of a good fight, be sure to tell those who come after how much fun it was." So, Jolinda, thank you so much for what you are doing and for joining us today.
Thank you
all. I had a great time.